that'll snap. But you can use even the smallest of branches to do this. But as long as you put it over the toggle, it's going to hold nice and tight. The next knot that I use a lot is called the prusik knot, and basically it's kind of like a necklace knot. If I were to tie one right now, all you would need is whatever line you're going to attach your prusik to. You're going to take and feed. If you have you're going to have a loop of cord usually, or one with loose ends. In this instance, I tied it in a square knot. And you're going to loop it through several times. I like to go about 6. And then you can pull everything through and tight. And what this does is it creates a series of small coils. And what this does is this allows me to, without tension, I can slide backwards and forwards. But if I put it under tension, it's going to remain in place. And I use the prusik knot on my ridge line of my tarp. If I decrease the tension, I can slide it. But as soon as I put tension on it, it's going to hold in place. So that's probably my second most used knot. The trucker's hitch is a very simple knot that you would use, for instance, to tension your tarp. And all that is you're creating a pulley, a 2-to-1 ratio with your ridge line or your guide line. And what you would do is you would make a slip knot, which is my 4th knot there, which is just that simple overhand loop right here. And you'd pass it around whatever you were going to be tensioning against. Put your loose end through the slip knot, and as you pull, that's going to give you a pulley effect so that you can actually tighten your tarp or whatever you want to tighten. Or if you want to pull things, like you can pull logs up with those, with the trucker hitch, because it's giving you that 2-to-1 advantage. Other than that, those are all the knots I use for hammock camping. I might use a square knot or two for various other camp chores. But other than that, that kind of completes my kind of hardware and knots. So, any questions on equipment before I move on to site selection or setup? Okay. So, what makes a great hammock camping site? You're going to need 4 basic things, well 3. 4th one's optional. Protection from the elements, so you're going to want to make sure that it's not a very exposed area. Try to find shelter from wind if you can. Protection from lightning, making sure you're picking a smart spot that's not too exposed for lightning. That's not the tallest trees. You don't want to be a giant antenna out there. A safe distance from your streams, your trails, your food sources. So you want to make sure you're at least 300 feet from your food source, streams, trails, to make sure that you're safe and that everyone else and every creature is safe. And also, what inspires me to get out there is awesome views. So if I can find a place that's, when I wake up in the morning and I see this amazing vista, or I see, wildflowers, whatever I can that's going to make me happy in the morning, I always try to find those too. So how you would hang your hammock is you're going to find 2 trees that are about 12 to 15 feet apart and that are at least 6 inches in diameter. If it's smaller than 6 inches, you're going to put way too much stress on that tree. It's probably not going to hold your weight, and that tree is probably going to bend. So you want to make sure that it's at least 6 inches in diameter for your safety and for the tree's safety. You're going to attach your webbing straps or suspensions roughly 6 feet from the ground. I find just above my head height works pretty well for me. It's just a nice reference. You would attach your suspension to the tree, and then you would adjust your height of your hammock to about 15 to 18 inches. And just for a reference point, that's right about where a good chair would be. So it's easy to enter and exit. You're not too high off the ground that you kind of fall out of your hammock. It's not too low that when you go to try to stand up, you're trying to lift your whole body again. And you want to try to attempt a 30-degree angle from your hammock to the tree. So for a reference, I'll use this side this time. We have our tree here, and we have our point on our hammock here. If we drew a straight line from the bottom of our hammock to the tree, That's our 90 degree. So we want this angle here to be roughly 30 degrees. What that's going to ensure is that you have enough sag in your hammock so that you're laying relatively flat. It's also helping to give you enough sag so that there's not like tension. Sometimes if you have a really tight hammock, it's going to create ridges and be uncomfortable, almost like you're sleeping on a hard floor. So a quick way I like to reference that if I'm in the woods is I'll take my thumbs and my index fingers and point them towards each other, and I'll line up my thumbs with the trees. And if I walk away until my fingers and everything kind of comes to perspective, if that angle of my hammock strap roughly meets, the angle from my thumb to my index finger, then I've got a roughly 30-degree angle. That's going to be pretty good for my night. Always use a flat webbing and not rope when attaching a hammock to a tree, especially if it's going to be load bearing. Your ridge line for your hand, your guide line for your tarp's not going to matter, but if you're loading a strap like you're on your hammock, for instance, anything that's round, small cordage is going to cut into the tree. It's going to really damage that cambium layer of the bark, and then that tree is not going to be able to supply itself with nutrients and water. It's going to eventually die a slow death. Yes?
It looks like you're only using 1-inch webbing. Is that adequate to prevent damage to the tree?
No, that's suitable. That's kind of industry standard to kind of help protect the tree, 1-inch webbing. Anything 1 inch or greater, usually you'll find 1 inch. Most of all of the stuff that we sell is all 1 inch. It's just different lengths, for instance. I have some examples here in a second. So here's kind of an ideal setup. So we have trees that are roughly 12 to 15 feet apart. We're attached with wide webbing straps around the tree. Our hammocks are attached to our straps. We have a 30-degree angle on our guidelines. They have a ridge line on their hammock. You can add a tarp, to keep you dry, and it's about that seat height. Real quick, while I'm talking about equipment and setup, I have a ridge line on my hammock, which is this line right here, and you can attach this to any hammock. What this does is no matter how tight or how messed up I hang my suspension, so if it's ridge tight, you can see my hammock always stays with the perfect amount of sag. And basically, all I did was take the length of my hammock, divided by 18, and I got the length of my ridge line. There's also equations on that on the internet as well. And I also can hang a little stuff sack to put my phone and stuff at night, and I also have a little lantern. So it just helps me with a consistent night of sleep. And you'll see that referenced in a lot of photos here, and a lot of people don't use them. I use them. It's all up to you. You just gotta have to kind of try it and see what works. Also for setup here, we've got a couple other things. So if you're setting up on a slope, and your head end is uphill and your foot end is downhill, you're going to want to make sure that you keep your straps level. So one end is going to end up being higher up and one end is going to be lower, so that you have a level sleeping height. Also, you want to make sure that your tarp ridge line, not what I have set up here, but you want to make sure that your tarp ridge line is set up below your hammock suspension. I set mine up high so people could kind of walk through before I set up, but this line right here should be about this height, right here. And that's going to ensure you that you have enough coverage for protection from the rain. A couple examples that are good and bad examples for your suspension. A lot of the Grand Trunks hammocks will come with a rope to hang with. It's kind of nice because it gives you something to hang with, but it's not really ideal for trees. It's going to cut in. There's an Atlas strap right there, giving you an idea of what something that's correct would look like. Again, I also have another the same bad picture again, but on this picture on the left, it's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but that is a rope that someone had left on a tree for many, many years. And the lines you see are actually not the rope anymore. That is the scars from the tree growing and the actual rope still being embedded in the tree. Hazards to look out for when you're choosing your tent site and when you're hanging are widowmakers, which are tree branches and trees that are about to fall. It's probably one of the number one dangers out there in the woods. Game trails, I can tell you from personal experience, you want to make sure you're not setting up across the game trail, because then if it's like the rut season, for example, you're going to have deer come through and crash into you, and that's never fun. The same goes with dens or other places animals will call home. Be observant, see what's around you. Like we said before, hanging from too small of a tree or hanging from standing dead trees can also be dangerous, kind of the same thing as the widowmaker. So on the picture on the left, you can see we have what the classic widowmaker looks like, where that arrow is pointing. We have a branch that's nearly broken off from the tree. It might be just held on there by the other branches around it. If that fell, it's going to be a rough day for you, possibly your last rough day. So I always like to try to find nice, pretty, trees with no dead branches hanging down. Thank you. This picture on the right, I would hang off that tree any day. A couple other things with pests, that nasty game trail. The nice thing about hammocks is, because you can hang anywhere, you can hang above rocks. You want to make sure that if you're hanging above rocks, it's not like a den for a rattlesnake or other, pests. And obviously, you don't want to stand in dead trees because that's going to fall over too. It's not going to be supportive of you. Any questions yet? No, we're good? Okay. So dealing with pests, since you're above the ground, you don't really have as many issues with the small pests anymore. If you have bugs, you're going to use a bug net. And of course, with any food or smellable item, you're going to want to hang your bear bag away from you. Bears will still come and check